Jackie accorded herself much importance, a major historical role that she probably never had. She talked of world events as if she had been there, implicated, consulted, and involved in strategic decisions. In reality, the president was alone, poorly advised, served by a bad cabinet, and envied by foreign leaders. She even recounted that Jack would have her read diplomatic telegrams. Jackie wasn't just a witness or accomplice to his power, but a genuine collaborator of the president. Cuba, Kennedy's nightmare moment. In April 1961, an attempted landing in the Bay of Pigs, led by anti-Castro troops equipped by the CIA, failed miserably. The humiliating episode proved critical for the president. The lady in pink commented, "Jack, under immense pressure, found it impossible to keep his calm. Castro's presence in Cuba terrified him." The event shook them. The newly elected president's credibility had nearly been ruined in the eyes of the world. She blamed the FBI and the CIA. Jack had been given no choice. She condemned Nixon and Eisenhower as responsible for allowing Castro to come to power in Cuba. Cuba was an open wound. After the Bay of Pigs, she saw Jack cry. A year later, the president negotiated the release of the rebels with Cuba's leader, Maximo, bringing an end to the episode. He then put Brother Bobby in charge of special operations from that point on. Although John was tough and generally slept well, his one moment of weakness and borderline depression was triggered by Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev was the leader of the Soviet Union. The pair met in June 1961 in Vienna, Austria. Kennedy and Khrushchev talked of the Tsars, of Tolstoy, of Laika, the dog that had just conquered space. Some weeks later, a present from Russia arrived for Jackie at the White House, one of Laika's puppies. In Vienna, she spent her time with Mrs. Khrushchev, of whom she painted a cruel portrait. Whenever Jackie took out a cigarette, the matronly woman warned, "Do not smoke so much. Russian women do not smoke." She also made it clear she thought Russian women were far superior to their American counterparts, which Jackie took as a slap in the face. She nonetheless recalled that Mrs. Khrushchev had a delightful face. De Gaulle had warned her, "Be on your guard. She's the most crafty woman." In Vienna, Jack found himself confronted with a cynical, warlike Khrushchev with a gloomy sense of humor. Khrushchev deemed Kennedy intelligent, but weak. Jack, on the other hand, saw Khrushchev as a gangster through and through. Jackie described a terrified Kennedy who confided something of the sort, "There will perhaps be a war with the USSR." Indeed, the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962 came a hair's breadth away from triggering a third global conflict. For 10 days and nights, the president worked in an apocalyptic atmosphere, and she remained at his side, loyal as ever. Jackie cast herself as witness of these monumental events taking place on the international political stage.
Today been informed by Chairman Khrushchev that all of the IL-28 bombers now in Cuba.
The Cuban Missile Crisis ended with indisputable victory for Kennedy. Jack, enjoying his glory, told her, "If anyone has ever wanted to shoot me, today would be the perfect moment." Jackie also appeared to bask in the reflected Kennedy glory. "I was the best. Jack was proud of me." For their residence in Glenora, Virginia, where they planned to live. Jackie would ride horseback while he slept, each in their own solitude. She described how he would devour history books. He would read in the car, at the table, even while walking. A fortnight later, she would recognize extracts from the books in his own speeches. It was on board boats that Jack was at his most relaxed. He loved the water, the sun, and the absence of telephones. That was true happiness. He regretted not having known more happy moments in his lifetime. For behind his permanently tanned face, Kennedy was sick and had been for a long time. Addison's disease gnawed at his bones, his spine slowly crumbling. The pain was crippling. His atrophied muscles even prevented him from putting on his shoes. He slept on a horsehair mattress placed on planks. Jack suffered greatly from his back. He was always suffering, all his life. Jackie spoke of Jack's courage, of Jack the martyr, of that wounded body, of crutches after surgery in 1955. That was when he discovered Novocaine, and it was as if he was born again. But what she could not speak about was his addiction to the drugs supplied by the scandalous Dr. Jacobson. From the early days of his presidency, Jacobson prescribed him shots that made the president euphoric. Bobby had the FBI analyze these drugs: Demerol, cocaine, painkillers. JFK was an addict. That was why, after the assassination in Dallas, Bobby accepted a botched autopsy to prevent anyone from discovering his brother's drug problem.
It will never be a dead.
The third interview with Arthur Schlesinger took place the next day.
The end of his time.
Jackie, by turns, revealed herself, hid, and revisited her life. Everything was so tangled. That night, she'd been thinking about Lyndon B. Johnson, her husband's successor. After his brother's death, Bobby Kennedy remained the Attorney General. In his eyes, Johnson had no mandate. He was an usurper. Jackie herself couldn't forgive the new president for having pounced at the presidency, being sworn in Dallas barely 1 hour after Jack's death. And yet, those are the rules.
I will do my best. That is all
I can't.
Johnson? He amused Jack, she said. But he was incompetent, crude, and lazy. The kind of man who couldn't make a decision, who yielded to everyone's opinions. Envious, greedy, only interested in the superficial symbols of power. Planes, protocol, buffet. Jack would say, "Do you realize what would happen to this country if he became president?" Jackie said she was thrown out of the White House. But she was lying. It was she who wanted to leave. Shortly after, Johnson offered her the post of ambassador in Paris. And anyway, she didn't want to go back there. Whenever she went anywhere in Washington, Jackie would go out of her way to avoid the place where she spent the best years of her life. She kept everything from those years, like so many trophies. The diaries, the menus, the memos. She used to love taking care of the plants there and setting the table for official dinners. Beauty, elegance, distinction. It had been her house. With the president's blessing, Jackie hired a French interior decorator. Despite the misgivings of American public opinion, afraid she was too much of a Francophile. Under the Kennedys' rule, the White House was transformed into the court of the Sun King, a setting worthy of Versailles. She had feared that her marriage might run aground during the presidency, but they had never been so close, a united family, an inseparable couple. She had an office in the White House and saw Jack every day, at any moment. She continued to paint a glowing and tender portrait of him, always attentive, always warm, always kindly, and she, the model wife. He loved putting the kids on his lap, she recalled, but he couldn't carry them in his arms or lift them into the air because of his back. He would tell them a lot of stories. The one about the white shark and the black shark, or the one about Bobo the Lobo. The perfect husband and an ideal father. Who could believe her? She wasn't talking to her interviewer. She was talking to posterity. The legend must live on. Jack was her God. God bless America. In God we trust. American presidents have always proclaimed their faith. Jack had decided to believe out of superstition, she said, but added, "I think that God is unjust." Because God didn't believe in John Kennedy. She paused, overwhelmed with emotion. She took a drink, hesitated. He had the most incredible aura. Jack was a living myth, the idol of youth, the world over. Knowing that he was loved made Jack feel great. And it was exactly that which distinguished him from the old dinosaurs in the Senate.